and welcome to FinextraTV. I'm Hannah Wallace, and kindly calling into our virtual studio now is Marie-Laure Gastellu, Head of Trade Services for Societe Generale, and we're speaking about green trade finance. So Marie-Laure, thank you very much for calling in today. It's good to have you on.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Hannah. Very happy to be with you.
No problem at all. So yes, we're covering a really interesting topic today, green trade finance. And we're also speaking off the back of Societe Generale's recently launched green trade finance initiative that targets customers active in clean energy or those that are transitioning from a carbon intensive activity to a sustainable business model. So we're going to be talking about that, but before we delve into the detail, it'd be great if you could set the scene for us and sort of describe how you define what a green trade finance transaction actually is. So let's start there.
I think it's a very good question. I would define a green trade finance transaction as being the issuance or the receipt of a trade instrument, which could be a guarantee, a letter of credit of an SBLC, associated with a project meeting very strict guidelines. And here is the very important point. The project for which this instrument will be issued must be associated with one of the 4 sectors that we have selected, and which are also related to the United Nations Sustainable Goal. And the sectors are waste management, water management, clean transportation, and renewable energy. And in addition to being as part of these sectors, the transaction must also demonstrate its green nature by meeting very precise monitoring indicators, which are usually industrial indicators, very often technical, that are specific for each project. For instance, we could have as an indicator the equivalent of CO2, which is saved when using a wind farm to produce electricity compared to a more carbon-intensive solution. And above that, the key aspect in the way SocGen has been approaching this is that we have been working with our team, our internal team of environmentalists, because as you may know, there is no standard to define green. So anybody on the street basically could say, okay, I'm doing green trade finance. And this is something we really wanted to avoid, because we don't want to be, kind of green accommodating. We really wanted to have a very professional and objective approach. And that's why we based our workshop, our internal work on the EU taxonomy. And we also derived all the documentation we've been using from what was already done on the loan market and on the bond market some years ago to define green bond and green loans. And it's a combination of all of this which will define a green guarantee or a green SBLC.
All right, that's really interesting. And I'm sure we'll talk more about how green is actually defined further down the line. But coming back to the initiative, can you tell us about the reasons why you launched this green trade finance initiative now, and also what market issues and opportunities it helps solve? Tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, 2 things. I think we launched this initiative a bit more than 2 years ago. At that time, we were already thinking that it would be probably very appropriate to integrate some sustainability or green angles into trade finance issue, taking into consideration the very specific and important role of trade finance in global trade. And at that time, we started to have some clients talking to us about their willingness to integrate a more sustainable approach, a more green approach, not only in the way they were producing their goods, but also the whole value chain, including the financing. And one of our clients came to us 2 years ago saying, okay, I would like to put in place a green guarantee facility. Can we do this together? And then we started to work on that, and we put the framework together. And after that, this has been very successful, and we had many clients talking to us about it. not only from the, as you mentioned, the clean energy, the new space, but also some companies acting in the more traditional spaces. And just to give you an example, last year we did green trade finance for more than 7 clients. So that's something which is really getting traction, I would say. That's where we are. That's where we are today. The issue that, or the value that is brought by this approach, I think it's, as you probably have noticed in many of the interviews you've been having, is that sustainability and positive impact on climate is becoming really a key driver for across the board, I would say, for all the players in the society or in the economy. And all our clients, especially the larger one, they have all embarked into a kind of an ambitious corporate and social responsibility journey. And what we bring to them is clearly the ability to demonstrate that they also take this aspect into account in the way they are putting together their financial instruments. We are contributing to them achieving their goals in terms of positive impact on climate and the environment. I think for me, it's one of the key aspects of it. And for us as a bank, it's the same, because we are very much committed to also contribute through the financing we are providing to having a positive impact. And it's a win-win situation where both the bank and the corporate are basically achieving their goal in terms of sustainability and positive impact.
Yes, it's interesting how we're now seeing sustainability on the agenda from the top to the bottom. And there are also discussions about green trade finance in international bodies at the EBRD and the ICC. So I'd be interested to see how you're positioned at SocGen in relation to these more global initiatives. What about that?
First of all, I must say that these initiatives are absolutely key, because one of the issues that we are facing right now with green trade finance, and more broadly speaking about sustainable trade, is this absence of standards. And as long as we don't have any standards, I mean, getting to a more industrial scale or larger scale will be quite difficult. And the other difficulty is that, as you rightly mentioned, what is green? We have a definition on green, but in another bank we have another definition of green. So we at SocGen, and that's why at SocGen we decided to stick to the EU taxonomy, by the way, because at least this is something which is very concrete. But we believe that we need to get that standard, and we believe that the ICC is the appropriate body, maybe as of today, the best positioned one to help all the players converge to this kind of standards. But I must say that this is taking really a long time, probably also because if you compare the loan market with trade finance, it's totally different. The loan market is much more standardized. It's a kind, the players are less numerous, there are less problematic to be addressed. Trade finance is so broad, so large, that to have everybody converging towards some kind of standards on something which is rather new will take a lot of time. So we are spending and we are dedicating time and brain to help building this standard, because we believe we need them. We are very much aware that it will take time and that we need to be patient. And between now and the time we have this standard, we'll still have to be able to do things, but in a way which will not be the exact way we would like it to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So on that thought of sort of brain power you're putting towards the cause, do you have any case studies or a scenario that illustrates the work that you've been doing at SocGen and sort of evidence, if you will, for it being truly green by your definition?
But I think, this is really the point. And I'm not sure if I will be able to answer your question in the way you wish me to do it. But let me give you a few examples of how we take things. First of all, when we work with a client to put in place a green trade finance facility, usually this client has already its own corporate and social responsibility journey, okay? And he has already defined and presented to the society, to the audience, what are the key aspects for this company, what he wants to achieve in terms of corporate and social responsibility. And the project is addressing and is serving usually are also mapped toward this corporate and social responsibility journey. So that's one thing. And based on that, when we discuss the project with the client, then we will define what kind of criteria can we decide to pick up, which are usually criteria which are part of its industrial data management. So again, it can be level of CO2, it can be the number of people who will be benefiting from this new renewable energy facility. So it can be this, as precise as that, but it's coming from its own, its own industrial database, and it's mapped to its own corporate and social responsibility journey. So we use that, and then we define threshold, and then we incorporate these indicators within the framework which we have designed, the documentation that we are putting in place. And then, using the EU taxonomy, we make sure, and we dig really very deep into all the details of the project, of what the instrument will be, the instrument we will be issuing, what for will it be used, and to make sure that we can really address all the aspects of our framework. And once we have done all this homework, which is quite extensive and which is quite detailed, then we can say, okay, this, as long as these criteria will be met, and on a regular basis we will be measuring them, then the instrument can qualify as being a green instrument. We are moving from being financial bankers towards, we are getting much closer to the industrial nature of our client. And, we need to really understand that in order to be able to build something which can be labeled as green, and then really as green, and also which is totally mapped to what our clients want to achieve.
All right, and you've highlighted before now the benefits of the EU taxonomy project, but I'd like to hear just a little bit more about that and sort of clarify what it is and how it's useful in establishing eligibility criteria for your green trade finance initiative, especially for those that aren't familiar with it. So what about that?
Yes, it is really for us the framework on which we can really build the objectivity of the green approach, because there is no standards. We really use it as the basis on which we will definitely be able to demonstrate in a very precise and concrete way, because we are adopting this approach, that the project and the instruments we are issuing for this project are really green, so to speak, according to what is defined in the EU taxonomy. So for us, it's the Bible. It's really because otherwise, in our view, how would you define green? This helps us defining what green is about, or what sustainability is about.
All right, so taking everything that we've covered so far into account then, what's the vision going forward? And also, how do you go about implementing this vision, perhaps with certain technology, and over what timeline? So by no means a small question to end on, but we'll give it a go.
So first of all, our vision is that we are only at the very beginning of this move towards green and sustainability, and we feel that there is a very strong traction. We have now decided to develop also, in addition to the green trade finance approach, a sustainable trade finance approach. And we are about to close the first deal with the first client in the next weeks. So it will be another premiere for us, and it's very, very important in our journey. And we are developing a very structured and organized approach with our coverage teams and with our clients to make sure that we are able to develop the appropriate dialogue around sustainability with the clients in trade finance, and in order to also be able to adapt our offer towards what they are willing to achieve. In terms of technology, the key challenge for us is more around data, I would say, because one thing is to originate and to structure deals which are providing this green trade finance, or this sustainability aspect in trade finance. But then what we also need to do, we need to be able at any point of time to identify in the portfolio of deals that we have which ones are eligible to positive impact. Because as you may know, being corporate or being banks, more and more we have to report as part of our activity what is contributing to positive impact, and it's going to be becoming even more important because at one point we may be benefiting from some kind of capital relief. For instance, if we are able to demonstrate that we have such and such deals which are actually providing this positive impact. And this data management is in itself a challenge. So we've been, it's quite recent, so we've been doing it a few times, but we are still to progress. And so for me, one of the key aspects in terms of technology is around the data. How do we make sure that we identify properly the deals in the portfolio to be reported as green or as sustainable? And the other aspect around technology, I would say, is then maybe more around SMEs. Today, the green approach in trade finance is really dedicated to large corporates. If we want to scale up at one point, we will need to be able to onboard SMEs. But to onboard SMEs, you cannot onboard SMEs the same way you onboard large corporate, because you need to have maybe a more simpler approach, less costly also approach to put in place. And at that point, we will need to have technology to support the approach. But we are not there yet. We are only at the very early start of the journey. It's speeding up clearly. We have a very nice and very intense roadmap this year with our clients, and we are also working into thinking what we could put in place to support SMEs in their corporate and social responsibility within this green trade finance approach. But you will have to invite me for another interview in a few months from now.
Well, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I hope to speak with you again further down the line. And quite an optimistic timeline there. But Marie-Laure, that's where we'll leave it today. But thank you so much, and some really interesting work you're doing at SocGen as well. So thank you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Anna. Take care.